cloudy, wishing me heart it was Sunday. Drinking wine and beer all the week, time for whiskey on a Sunday. You are indeed very welcome to join me for this latest installment of my usually weekly, Sunday, usually evening, 8 p.m. Instagram live series, Whiskey on a Sunday with me, Sam for All. This week, a little bit different, a little bit of a special episode with it being on a Monday. So any day is a good day for whiskey, really. So now, as we're still in the month of March, and as we continue to enjoy remnants of St. Patrick's Day celebrations, and of course, celebrating all things Irish, this week, I'll be talking about the first new Irish whiskey that I sipped on during my 2018 trip to Ireland, Knappogue Castle 14 Twinwood Single Malt Irish Whiskey. However, before we officially begin, as always, I do need to ask that if anyone is tuned in that is not yet of legal age where they live, in order to enjoy and consume or purchase alcohol where they live, that they now sign off. All right, so the dogs have caught something's attention, and that is the beauty of being live, folks. That's how you know this is not staged on these type of events. Alrighty, I'm sure it was just a squirrel, probably excited about the prospect of whiskey. Okay, so for everybody else that is of legal age, that's still here with me, let's dive into tonight's whiskey. Now let me first start by asking you all a question. How many of you have heard or are aware or are familiar with Knappogue Castle, the whiskey or the actual castle itself? So, okay, giving you a few moments to collect your thoughts on it. I'm sensing through the virtual airwaves that maybe the Irish whiskey aficionados, that they may be somewhat familiar with the name Knappogue Castle, but I'm also getting the sense, tuning in, I'm getting the sense that for many of you, this may be a new name. And you know, if it's new to you, that's more than fair, especially for Canadians, as up here, it's not a brand that we see very often in the Great White North. And to be honest, even in the good old US of A, it's really only prevalent in certain pockets of the country. So, while it may be a new name to you, and it was new to me when I tasted it in Killarney in 2018, the brand itself is almost 50 years old. So I mentioned in an online teaser for tonight's episode that, you know, there is also a tie to Texas with this whiskey. And that's very true indeed. You see, the Knappogue Castle whiskey brand was created by a Texan, Mark Edwin Andrews, who was also a former American World War II Navy officer and subsequently a former assistant secretary under President Truman, US President Truman, of course. After his naval career, Mr. Andrews enjoyed a very lucrative career in the oil industry, and that success allowed Mr. Andrews and his wife to go to Ireland and to purchase a run-down castle in County Clare, Ireland, the Knappogue Castle. Now, it's pronounced Knappogue, so N-A-H-P-O-G-U-E. Knappogue is the phonetics of it. And that name means Hill of the Kiss in Irish Gaelic, and the castle was originally built by the McNamara clan way back in 1467, so there's a lot of history there with the castle itself. Now, Mark Andrews and his wife bought the derelict structure in 1966 and then began the arduous task of rebuilding it. And as if that wasn't enough, at the same time as working on the castle, Mr. Andrews also started another project, that of buying and collecting Irish whiskey casks, which of course had Irish whiskey in them, and he did that from quality producers at the time. He in turn then further aged them himself and then bottled them under the label Knappogue Castle, essentially becoming a bonder, right? And we've talked about that term, bonder, many times before here on Whiskey on a Sunday with Sam for All. So yeah, essentially Mr. Andrews was a bonder. Now, one of the more prominent whiskeys that he released was the last bottling that Mark Andrews himself did, and that was in 1987. And it was aptly called Knappogue 1951, because that's the whiskey that was in there. It contained a pot still Irish whiskey from the former, now defunct B. Daly distillery, and it was aged for 36 years. Now, have to be honest, sadly, I must report to all of you that I personally have not yet had the opportunity to taste any of the Knappogue 1951. It still fetches a pretty high price with collectors online in different forms that I've seen. But that being said, the dedicated whiskey sommelier that I am, if anyone from the good folks at Knappogue are watching, and if they would like to send me a little dram, a wee small one, for a taste, I'd love to give it a go. More than thrilled to do that for you folks. Just service that, I'll do for you. Okay, so Mark Andrews started the brand back in the late 1960s, but today it's got very different ownership. The first turn in ownership kind of happened in 1996 when the castle itself was sold to a developer who then uses it for events and weddings. Obviously it's closed right now because it's pandemic times, but that's what's going on with the castle, and you can visit it if you're in the area. So that's 1996. Then in 1998, one of Mark Andrews' sons, named Mark Andrews III, he launched a company called Great Spirits LLC, which started selling the 1951 whiskey and also some other vintage single malts. Now in 2003, kind of follow the bouncing ball here, in 2003 Great Spirits was amalgamated into Castle Brands Inc. And under that name, age statement single malts started appearing, with the Knappogue 12 being the first one, right? And when we talk age statement, we're talking a number on the bottle. So in 2019, Castle Brands was bought by Pernod Ricard, who owns it now. So, quite the journey of ownership in the last 50 years. Okay, deep breath and great background, but I can hear you all saying, what about the whiskey? Man, come on, Paul. Fair play to you all. So let's dive into the whiskey itself. This is indeed Knappogue 14. It's a single malt, right? And that means it's been it contains a whiskey of at least 14 years of age inside of it, right? The whiskey stocks in the 1980s for Knappogue brand were thought to have been produced at Cooley, right? Remember, he's a bonder, so they don't make their own. So they were thought to have bought stocks from Cooley, but currently the stocks supplying Knappogue Castle are sourced from Bushmills. Now, that's also where in one of my teasers I mentioned the year 1608. Right, that's the year that Bushmills claims to have been founded. So again, just a little tie back to the teaser from last week. So Bushmills makes it for these guys. 20-year commitment, if I'm not mistaken. The whiskey in front of me here, this is triple distilled. It's unpeated. It is non-chill filtered, and we've talked about chill filtering before. I'm not going to go into that again. It's also non-colored. So as I've said often, Ireland's one of the countries that does allow a coloring agent to go into the whiskeys. It's E150A, it doesn't taste like anything, doesn't smell like anything, and it's legal. Canada does that as well. Scotland uses it sometimes. This does not have it. So the color you see comes from the 14 years minimum being in wood. Single malt whiskey, quick reminder, right? It means that the whiskey is made from pot still, those onion type of pot stills, and using only 100% malted barley. Okay, so 46% ABV, so one of the more robust ABVs that we see for Irish whiskies out there, and it's kind of a ambery gold in color. It's really, it won't do it justice here on the camera, but it's a really kind of deep ambery gold. Very, very nice. Twin wood on the label and in the name means that the whiskey has seen time in both former bourbon casks as well as former Oloroso sherry casks. So twin wood, casks are made out of wood, 2 casks, you get the drift. All right, so we get our nose ready, right? Remember, 3 times. Climatize the nose, we go, hello there, how are you? Pleasure to meet you. I hope you smell delicious. Okay, so now our olfactory senses are all ready. We're primed, we go in, big sniff, get the schnoz right in there. So what do we get? Right away for me, it's rich, it's creamy, there's sweet notes. It's malty a bit. I mean, makes sense, 100% malted barley, so malty for me right away. Then I get some ripe fruit, like peach, apricot, nectarine, and I get a bit of red apple as well. And then the fruit kind of changes for me. It becomes more cooked fruit on the nose. I get baked apple pie. I get marmalade. I get candied citrus, like candied lime, and then a bit of banana bread in there. Also getting some grilled nuts, some honey, some coconut, which is interesting, and a little fresh biscotti. And then spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, and then I get some sweet notes like toffee and vanilla all abounding through there. So, fair bit going on in the nose. All right, we go in for a taste. Remember, we're going to swish and swirl. We're going to coat our 5 flavor receptors in the mouth. Sláinte. Alrighty. So it's fairly rich. Right away I notice it's fairly rich. But it's not cloying in terms of sweetness, and it's not overly sweet. But it's got a little richness to it. Really ripe red apples popping out, and I'm getting some spice right away. So white pepper, clove, black pepper, and then some grassy notes kind of wave over that. Getting some ripe pink grapefruit, some green apples, so some bright fruit notes. A little mango and a little passion fruit, which is fun. And some floral notes, so orange blossom, a little violet, toasted toasted nuts now, toasted grain, sultana raisin, big time, sherry, right, from the sherry cask, I get that sherry flavors coming through, vanilla, and just kind of right here at the back, there's a little barrel char going on. It kind of balances everything out. So, the brightness and the bitterness of that kind of play well with the sweet notes. That's a big yum for me. On the finish, talking and, everything's kind of settling down now. I'm getting stewed red apple, a little ripe clementine, some cinnamon spice, a little clove, and just a touch of oak. What do I think? Overall, you can see, half the bottle's gone. It is a whiskey that I enjoy. And truthfully, I'm more than a little bit disappointed that I can't seem to find it here in Ontario. There is a Canadian website that I've come across that does list it for approximately $125 a bottle, Canadian funds. But Ontario provincial laws currently do not allow for that type of transaction to happen. You can't import whiskey in from a third party or any alcohol from a third party. And it's the same in Quebec, which is not far from me either, so I can't look there for it. The bottle that I'm nursing ever so gently and delicately is one that I bought in Ireland in 2018, bought it at the Dublin duty free, at the time for a very reasonable 45 euros in my opinion. For my US family and friends, you guys are way more fortunate, as I have seen it listed on several websites for around $60 USD. $60 for 14-year-old Irish whiskey. This one in particular, pretty good bargain in my opinion. That said, if you see it in a pub or if you're at someone's house, of course, depending where you live and what's going on in the world, only do so when it is safe to do so. But if you do see it in a bar or pub, or you're at someone's house and you see that and you have an opportunity to have a little sample, I would encourage you to try it just a little bit. Especially if you can do so before you buy and make that commitment. It really is a bit unique in that not many Irish single malts carry age statements, and a 14-year-old Irish whiskey period is not really running rampant out there in the marketplace. So, giving this a little try at a bar or at a friend's house, at the very least, it's going to give you a sense as to how that extra aging affects the delicate nature of a triple distilled Irish whiskey, because we see a lot of non-age statement single malts, or we see 12 as a more popular option out there. So it'll give you a sense of that. Alrighty. So folks, that is indeed a wrap for this edition of Whiskey on a Monday with me, Sam for All. Now, whether you are live with me here tonight on Instagram or whether you're catching this on video replay via my Sam for All YouTube channel, Facebook page, IGT platform, regardless of how, I do want to sincerely thank you very much for spending your time with me. Heads up, next week will be a pre-recorded video as it is Easter. So keep watching my social media feeds for more details on what I'll be showcasing then, and tasting, of course. In the meantime, please, folks, continue to stay safe out there, be well, and Sláinte from Sam for All.